As things stand, state aid is one of the last sticking points in the EU-UK negotiations. Essentially, the EU is saying that if British companies want free access to the EU's internal market, then they must compete fairly. And that means they shouldn't benefit from public subsidies that give them an unfair advantage. There should be rules in place. Now, it's perhaps surprising that this is controversial. Only last year, the EU and the UK agreed a political declaration that clearly envisaged that the UK would carry over, effectively, the EU state aid regime. Now, the UK has gone back on that position. It says on the 1st of January, it's going to fall back on WTO anti-subsidy rules. It will apply those rules and no more. In due course, it will draw up its own rulebook, but the timing and the content of those rules is uncertain. We will have to see whether that's good enough for the EU. Let's not forget that the EU has said it wants to see operational and credible rules on state aid, which have effective enforcement mechanisms. And it's widely acknowledged that WTO anti-subsidy rules are less stringent than EU state aid rules and have much weaker enforcement mechanisms. We'll have to see how that plays out. What is clear is that the UK can't avoid scrutiny from the EU when it comes to subsidies that could impact the EU market. There are two reasons for that. First of all, the UK has already agreed to apply the full EU state aid rulebook as concerns subsidies that might affect trade between Northern Ireland and the EU. That's in the Irish Protocol to the withdrawal agreement. It's very clear. The draft internal market bill tries to row back on this, but as we know, that would contravene international law. Now, there is a way out, and that is for the UK to persuade the EU to amend the Irish Protocol. And that is a possibility that's envisaged in the protocol itself. But for that to happen, it's likely that the EU would want to see a fully formed regime on state aid in the UK that's operational from the 1st of January. And where would we find that? Well, there is one rulebook which one could describe as being oven ready, and that's the EU rulebook. So it's not impossible that the UK may agree to continue the EU state aid rulebook, at least on a provisional basis, until it decides, how it wants to amend that for the future. The other point, which is quite independent of the Brexit negotiations, is that the EU is currently looking at ways to deal with companies that operate in the EU propped up by large distortive subsidies from foreign governments. Now, those rules are still under consideration. They've still not been written, let alone adopted. But if they were to come into effect, then British businesses that benefit from subsidies and do business in the EU market may well find themselves facing scrutiny from the European Commission. So, again, we'll have to see where all this ends up. But one way or another, I think it's fair to say that state aid rules, in some shape or form, will continue to be a reality for British business for the foreseeable future.